is Tuesday, and so you guys know what time it is. It is Let's Talk About It Tuesday with your host Cheryl and Saterica. Of course, I am Cheryl, and Saterica is happening to work late again tonight. Her schedule's been kind of crazy here, but she would jump on soon, about 15, 20 minutes from now, and join us in our broadcast. Tonight, we definitely have a special guest here. Um, I'm going to let her introduce herself, but before so, I just kind of want to introduce you guys to the topic in which we're going to be speaking about tonight. August is Black Business Month. I don't know if a lot of us or have been familiar with that because I just actually learned about it myself maybe about, I don't know, about a month or so ago. And we really wanted to focus up on the topics surrounding entrepreneurship, nonprofit enterprises, and women that were trying to either get into business or were entrepreneurs themselves. So we've been focused discussions, if you've been paying attention and following us along, around those Black Business Month themes. Tonight, we're going to be speaking about cultivating the art of storytelling and cultivating storytelling into allowing women age 50 and over to thrive in enterprises as well as creating enduring legacies for their generations um, to follow. I was actually on the way over here, and I was thinking about some stories that I had with my grandmother, and my grandmother Eva. I think that she done a lot of things. Of course, she worked in domestic work most of her life, but I remember sitting around and hearing her stories, and what she used to tell me about her and my grandfather and the restaurant that they had ran over in Mexico, Missouri. And I just, I paid attention. I just really loved engaging in those conversations with her, and just it was just so enlightful to me and just interesting, and just kind of sparked my spark my just wanting to know more about her life and the business that she was operating. And also too, I remember hearing stories from my mother about my aunt Florence, who owned a restaurant down in Montgomery City, her and my uncle Tommy. Just being able just to hearing those stories, and it's like, wow, how was these women and men able to the hardships that they were facing, especially coming from right off of that generation, probably with slavery and one thing another. At least they weren't slaves, but their parents probably was, or their grandparents, something like that. But they were able to build these businesses, and just hearing those stories always just, like I said, sparked the interest. So, tonight with storytelling, I'm very, very happy to have her here. We put out a request that we were looking for speakers, and she answered the call, and she shot us an email, said, "Hey, look, this is who I am, and I am an elder, I'm a storyteller, I'm a healer." And it's just like, wow, we definitely wanted her to, come to the podcast and talk to us a little bit more about how we can use storytelling, to improve ourselves and empower ourselves in creating these thriving enterprises. So, without further ado, I'm going to let my guest introduce herself because I know that I'll mess up her last name. So, Gogo, I'm going to turn it over to you to introduce yourself and let the audience and listeners know exactly who you are.
Thank you, Cheryl, and thank you for inviting me to be on your podcast. This is exciting. I've never been using this software before, and actually, it's good when someone gives me a topic to focus on. Okay, and let me just talk about my name. I've been known by many names in my life, but GoGo Griot describes who I am and applies to my ancestral heritage in a way, which we'll talk about later. So, Gogo is from South Africa, and it means healer, elder, and grandma in a lot of instances. Now, I'm not a grandma, I'm a grand aunt, but I am a healer and an elder. Griot is from West Africa, and that means storyteller and poet. And actually, they played a lot of times the role of the historian in different cultures in Nigeria and Ghana, a lot of those cultures in West Africa. And so I am a storyteller. So I said I will be GoGo Griot. So it's people will know who I am, at least people
Okay.
who are from Africa. And as I share it, more people will know. And so that's why it came. And actually, I tell people that the name was given to me by my ancestors. I wasn't really looking for another name, and it's not I have another legal name, but GoGo Griot is the work I do. And I like the name GoGo. It's quick,
Hmm.
easy for people to say.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I think it's a beautiful name, and I've liked, the origins and how you tied it into ancestors and everything. Because I know I've been kind of researching that out myself, and I'm still, it's a thought, so I'm still playing around with it. I mean, was that something intuitively that you just knew, or uh,
I actually can remember may find I journaled about it, but I my journaling has been really irregular after I spent 1 year, and I think it was 2019. I journaled every day for almost a whole year, and then I stopped abruptly. And I've been journaling since I was a child, on and off.
mm-hmm,
But when it came to me, it came really clear. And how or when and what day, I don't know. Although the go go was, I purposely chose go go. That I know because I was following go go's in South Africa,
hmm
elder healers, women most, and women. And most of them will be go go, and they'll have their South African name, which are multi-syllable names I don't know how to pronounce. So I'm not going to ruin anybody's name. There was one lady though, her name was Gogo Dineo, which is easy, and she uh, was kind of like an influencer in South Africa. She had a lot of followers. She's on Instagram. She and her husband do YouTube videos, and I'd watch them. And her husband is a traditional kind of spiritual person and traditional African spirituality. And he actually helped her to get back into her traditions and to realize herself as a healer because she'd been raised as a Christian. And because of apartheid, there was a purposeful effort to disgrace traditional spiritual
hmm
practices. And so a lot of the Africans who became Christians, totally diss traditional, but there's been a change going on since, the end of apartheid. And even during it, people just kept it hidden.
hmm
So I that's why I liked Go Go, and I said, this is I like. And then I like, and I'm familiar with Griot, and I just kind of, it came to me, okay, GoGo Griot. And it wasn't, and this is the thing, people think that there's bolts of lightning when you get, inspiration or something. It's just a thought, it's an idea, and it's an instance. And we can say, oh, it's I or me, or we can say, hey, it was my ancestors or my spirit guides or my angels, because we're all energy and we're all connected.
right.
Yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, Go, how did you get into storytelling?
Well, it's really interesting. I grew up telling stories. I'm the type of person, if you ask me a question, you're going to be, you could be prepared to stand for 5 to 20 minutes to get your answer. And it's not because I grew up in a house where we called ourselves storytellers, and our grandmamas actually didn't talk that much. But my mother talked a lot, and my sisters talked a lot, and they were from Georgia. And Georgia people talk a lot.
Mhm.
And so, and it's always, and it's telling stories, and basically just talking about what's been happening, who we saw, what you thought. But there are families that don't do that,
Right.
and so, but I was more when I was growing up concentrating on being a writer, and then I became a performing artist. But I was always telling stories in one way or another. Even when I was writing poetry, a lot of my poems were telling stories. But I didn't discover the art of storytelling, oral storytelling, until I returned to college in my 40s. And I actually was doing a college work study or whatever college job in this Latino theater in Denver. And there was a little brochure, a folded sheet of paper, but it was a Black woman. And it reminded me of some things I'd used as a performance artist. But what I noticed was that this woman had performed in schools and all kinds of places I'd never performed. And she was a storyteller. And so that struck me. Excuse me. And when I mentioned it to the lady I was working with, she said, "Well, I've got this textbook on storytelling. You might like it." And so I took the textbook, which was written by Norma Levo, who was a storyteller, but she was also a nurse, which is also interesting.
Mhm.
And so, anyhow, after I read that book, I was in college. I had originally been thinking I was going to get a degree in Spanish and then go and get my teaching certificate and teach Spanish, which was a crazy idea for some reason. But I had heard these horror tales about teachers having to deal with parents in Denver. And I said, "Oh, I don't want to deal with that." And then, though, after reading that textbook on storytelling, I said, "Well, I'll get a degree in storytelling." And I began telling stories in Denver. I don't know how I went and got gigs telling stories at the annual Black Arts Festival they had in Denver at that time. And I did that for almost every year that we were in Denver, it was about 5 or 6 years. And that was always fun. And I got a degree, and I actually told stories and got paid for telling stories for several years, but not enough to live on full time. And it was mostly either performance for adults or kids, and some workshops and residencies. I did a few school residencies, mostly in Iowa, because my husband and I got married. We moved to Iowa. But I also did Underground Railroad stories in Iowa, which were really fun because I lucked up on meeting this man who was doing research on the Underground Railroad in Iowa. And I don't know how I met him, but I know it was in this history museum that they have in Des Moines. And he was very kind. He said, "Hey, you can look at my research." And I got a lot of stories from his research that weren't in, published books.
Right.
And when I got that and I created my Underground Railroad stories, I was able to get the Humanities Iowa Speakers Bureau. And I went through the state telling Underground Railroad stories to different historic societies in the small towns in Iowa. And that was really kind of fun. And some of them actually, there was a couple, I think, who were in actual buildings that had been used for the Underground Railroad.
Wow.
But it still was part time. And so I would say I had a midlife crisis, and I got laid off the job I thought I'd have part time forever. And I got really angry, but I ended up it ended up leading me to being a nurse for 10 years. So,
Yeah. Wow.
and that's why I refer to Norma Levo, who oddly enough was also a nurse, but she
Okay.
became a storyteller and wrote a book on storytelling. We actually got to meet and talk a little.
Wow. That's so how would you describe storytelling? Would you just Is it like a just oral traditional stories which we just kind of pass down, or what would be
Well,
your definition?
well, storytelling is what makes us human, and we've been doing it since we started talking to each other. And
Mhm.
basically, I say all of life is a story.
Mhm.
Everything that exists is a story.
Mhm.
We don't like to admit that. People fight wars over stories. People found religions that are stories.
Mhm.
And it's interesting that everybody questions every other religion's stories as not being true, you know. But me having practiced Catholicism,
Mhm.
Islam, Hinduism, and Buddhism, I believe in all the story because to
Right.
me that's what makes it, you know,
Make it
why try
interesting.
to be in a religion if you can't aspire to do something that's more than we can do as humans, you know? That's the thing that makes spirituality and religions interesting to me is that it's more of the aspiration for overcoming our limits than the dependence on something out there better than us, because every religious story, they tell us you can attain these heights, you know. So I look at stories as just part of who we are as human beings. I look at stories as something we can create and we can change or we can allow to box us in.
Mhm. Yeah.
And too many of us get stuck because we're in a story, because we're attached to all the things that go with the story, whether
Right.
it's prestige, whether it's a name, whether it's relationship, whether it's money, you know. And the thing about stories and the thing that makes them fun is when you realize that they can change, you can take a lighter view on life. You can start to look at experiences in different ways. It's not the end of the world. You can start looking at other people's stories and realize, oh, I'm not the only one who's been through this kind of crap, you
Mhm.
know?
Mhm.
And that's one of the most important things about stories and why people need to have them and hear them so that people know, one, you're not the only ones who's going through this, good, bad, or in between.
Mhm.
And two, for those who haven't had them, to know that, hey, there's some people who are going through some really weird stories, but there's some people who are going through some really happy stories.
Mhm.
And when we can start, and the thing is, a story is not a set of data or statistics or a news report, although some news reports do come close to being stories. What makes a story is that evokes some emotion, some recognition of a commonality as of experience of just being human, even if the story is about something someone's never experienced.
Mhm.
There's still always how the person describes how they felt, what it was like. That's what makes a story a story. Now, I particularly, in terms of my coaching program, and what I think is particularly powerful is oral storytelling. And it's really super powerful when you can do it in small groups, live, together.
Mhm.
But it's equally as powerful when you can do it online, but totally paying attention to telling stories and being in a story circle. Well, it's a square or rectangle when we use it virtually. But the idea is to allow people to just relax and share stories from a similar type experience. And then you start to get to know each other and you build on those relationships. Because when we reflect on it, the way people are living now, particularly, I was just reflecting this. I think since the pandemic of so much has changed.
Mhm.
And I don't think people still have been able to take a breath and look at it. It's just this constant, almost this constant state of stress and worry, and
Mhm.
another bad thing happening and another bad thing happening, which is making the news and all of that. But there's a whole lot of things that never make the news. There's a whole lot of good things happening and a whole lot of awareness that people have, and a whole lot of people willing to either say we're not going to put up with being driving in trucks when the weather's over
Mhm.
100 degrees and we don't have air conditioning. You know,
Right.
what the UPS people did and other unions are doing is really good, because people are saying we're not going to put up with this. Or, like a lot of the coaching people I've had, they're looking for other jobs. They're looking for fulfillment in their work, not just a paycheck,
Right.
and that's important for corporations and small businesses to understand. You're in business because you have people willing to work for you. And
Mhm.
we've come to the time now where more and more people are saying, well, I know I need this work. I may have to pay all this money in college bills, but I don't have to be treated like crap.
That's right.
And I don't have to be stressed out. And I'm going to keep looking until I find something on my own or create my own business.
Mhm.
And and there's certain things, and there's so many areas of life in which we really need to have people who are going to work and do these things, because otherwise, services, from school buses to hospitals, start having problems.
Mhm.
And that this is and I think the solution to a lot of these problems is for the employers and the institutions to start saying, we need to get to know these people. We need to let people get to know each other, feel at home. How do you do that? By telling stories.
Yeah.
And I say it has to be a facilitated story, because you don't want someone just saying, oh, well, let's talk. You don't want it to be a
Right.
therapy session. You
Right.
don't want it to be a gripe session.
Right.
You don't want people to feel inhibited by someone else. So you
Mhm.
need someone who can facilitate the circle. And
Mhm.
once people do that, after a while, it starts to flow even easier. At least that's my theory.
Yeah.
I've done it informally with one-time events. I've done it with teenagers, and I am looking for companies now to do it as a pilot.
Okay. Right.
And so,
Yeah. And I love your theory, and I think that you hit it, right up on the head up on the nail as far as like in the work environment, itself is to have a facilitated, storyteller so that, you can learn about your employees and your employees can learn. I'm sorry, I got phone quick call coming in. That's weird. Um, but so that your employers can get to know the employees and staff can also get to know the employers. Because I mean, when business comes to me, it's all about a working relationship, and so that we can get to know one another, and also to make better workplace environments too, as well. Because if you listen to the story, let's take for the single mom for instance. Okay, if you knew that she was a single mother that had issues of trying to get maybe transportation back and forth to the school for her kids, then you can develop better policies and everything. For you for the workplace. You have mentioned about your coaching program, and that coaching program is called the Power Story Experience, if I'm not mistaken.
correct.
So can you please tell us what a power story is, and how does one find their power story?
Okay. Well, Power Story. I before I came up with the names Power Story, I was actually writing and looking at power. I had personal power, and
Hmm.
I actually developed this concept of personal power several years ago, even while I was actually a nurse.
Hmm.
And I've come back to it, and I keep coming back to it. Now it's really solid in me that, after I was looking at different ways and a couple of books that have been written by men about power. And going all the way back, people talk about Machiavelli in the back, way, way back. And his theory of power was totally aggressive,
Yep.
totally macho, totally dominant
Mhm.
still in certain areas. And there's been a recent book by another man who takes some of Machiavelli's things and then a few other things that aren't so bad, but it's still a very masculine, aggressive approach to
Mhm.
power. Then I came
Well,
across, and so I was thinking about this, and even I was doing posts about power, thinking that, power doesn't have to be that. There's another level of power. And I actually found a book written by a man which uh, used some of the standards I was thinking of what power is and what I had put in my personal power pyramid. And so after what happened is I discovered my power story, which is storytelling. And so it gets really silly and simple when I say that. But I had on my whole entrepreneurial journey, I had tried a couple of things with story for being a business. I actually had a legacy story project I tried and did some workshops, and but they didn't work. And I particularly resisted, and I still won't do storytelling for branding because there's so many people doing it. It just to me seems pretty obvious. There's just technical things people need to learn. But what I have always liked about storytelling when I did workshops, even when I was working with youth, little kids, or even older youth, I saw how having a story circle, me telling a story would lead to others telling their stories. And if we did a workshop over a longer period of time, those who were shy would eventually come out and be more confident. They'd share their story, and the whole group would get better.
Mhm.
And so in July, I was invited by a local group to do a program for teenagers. And I said, yeah, I'd love to do it because I hadn't worked with any teenagers here. And it was just six teens. And I did a performance, and that started to loosen them up, but they really got loosened up after we did this storytelling kind of game where there were little cards that had words or subjects you'd have in the story, like main character, place, time, different elements.
Mhm.
And so they just pull them and say something silly, with not because it didn't have any order, and I was keeping the notes. And at the end of it, in less than a minute, I had told them a perfect story from all the things they put together. And they were cracking up. And after that, they were even more relaxed and did another creative game. And then when I told my husband about it, he said, you can do that with adults.
Mhm.
And then after that, since then, it's just been like, oh, it's, I can see so many ways of using story and working with story that I had not considered before.
Mhm.
But part of it is due to my having been a coach because and I resisted coaching for the very long time because I didn't know what it was. When I got online off my job, I thought it was kind of bogus until I started getting coaches. And I've had good ones and bad ones, but I do know it works. I do know it helps.
Yes, it does.
And actually, I got my certification through Better Up, which is an online group. And it's because of my coaching clients that I feel good in approaching corporations and saying, I know you've got some teams that aren't working well together, especially these bigger corporations.
Mhm.
And because I get clients from corporations and I knew startups, but I'm not going to go to a startup. I want to go to some people who have some money. And I don't, even if their things are uncertain now, I just need a couple who let me do a pilot with
Yeah.
a team that's having problems. And doing that pilot, you see what works, you see what doesn't work, and you see what people need. And and I'm also thinking about, okay, I might eventually go on and try and do something again online and get
Mhm.
some. people just to do something online, because there's all kinds of different levels, different approaches, different things we can do, different ways that I can work with people with story. But I like any story circle needs to be defined. What's the purpose of the story? We're just going to get to know each other, or because I did racial healing story circles during the racial uprisings in 2019, and they were actually done online, but they were done with local people.
Mhm.
The problem was people didn't want to go further. They didn't want to go deeper. They didn't want to go further than a couple of circles and a couple of performances from me. And I did a month long Black history online with the library, which is really cool. Um, and I told stories every week. But doing any deeper depth work, and it wasn't just in this town.
Yeah.
We saw it happen. And I kind of was not surprised because even in the midst of everything that was going on, I said, I've seen this before. We've got to change.
Yes.
There has been some change, but each time it's just this little bit, little bit. They're not going to stop killing people because it's not just Black people. It's just the way that they have been trained from
Mhm.
England. You know, when you look at any kind
Yeah.
of movies from history and you see the way different cultures have killed their own people.
Mhm.
It's not just that they kill Black people because we're Black, it's just because it's ingrained in certain trainings and in stories people are told when they're trained to be police or soldiers, that when they get this gun in their hands and this person's described as a criminal or an enemy, they're
Right.
no longer human and they can possibly kill you. So you got to kill them first.
Mhm.
It's a story.
Mhm.
The real story are these are usually young men. Some of them ain't had not much of life experience, and they've been told the same thing you've been told.
Mhm.
And it's very and it's the young men who say, "Well, do I really want to do this?" But the thing is that for people of color, and still it is for people of color and for Black men, one of the best jobs to get is a military job.
Mm.
You
Interesting.
know,
Yeah.
because guaranteed income, take care of your family, take care of you, and if we're not in war, it's a pretty good job. But
Yeah.
it's all these, but they're all stories. They're all stories. The stories people use to recruit people to fight wars, the stories people use to start wars, and the stories we use to stop the wars.
Mhm. Yeah. Interesting. So what would, and this is kind of going to go a little bit off the topic of what we, was kind of planning to talk about. So what would you give, what kind of advice would you give to those young men who have their story in which they're living is that why should I go fight for a country who has, just either, racially profiled me or out here killing me? Why would I want to give up my life to go fight for, this freedom in which I'm not even given freedom right here, in my, why should I, why should I do that? What advice
I
would
would,
you give,
I,
to the, because you're not even, uh, you used to hear about, with young black men. I know my son, and I can't speak for all the black men out there, but I know what you used to hear about kids talking about. Hey, I want to be a police officer. I want to be a police officer. And you're not even hearing that type of story anymore. Because of all what we're seeing out there and what's going down with police brutality, the killing of unarmed black men and everything. So, what advice would you have, to these young
I
folks that are out there?
actually I would tell any young man who's smart enough to say I don't want to do that, and they're not getting drafted. You have my full support. Just find you a legal way of making your living.
Mhm,
That's what I'm saying. Just find a legal way. And there's so many ways, and there's so and for the brothers to stop shooting each other. I
mhm,
don't understand it.
yeah,
They don't, it makes no sense.
mhm,
And we the The problem I feel with Black people in America is that the goal still for too many people is to be quote unquote like white people. But when you are married or live with white people, well, they're just people just like us.
Mhm.
The whole thing is this whole racial thing is used and has been used from slavery to keep certain people in power and to
Mhm.
keep others hating other people
Yeah.
so that they support the people who are in power and work for them. And, and my whole thing about power is that everyone has power. Everyone has personal power.
Mhm.
But somehow, from the ancient needs for survival,
Mhm.
people give up and this is where we get into ancestral thing, have inherited these ancestral lineages that say we have to submit to others who are more powerful than us because we're not powerful.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
that can come from not having food or shelter initially.
Mhm.
And then when people start killing you, that's a whole nother other thing.
Yeah.
You know, I they say that, in ancient times, there were women goddesses, and Black people had power.
Mhm.
And you can look at all the little history things, which have mostly been written by men. I have this feeling that somewhere in these two cases, women and Black people abused their power
Hmm.
and lost their power.
Hmm.
And it didn't happen quickly, it's over time. And we have not yet figured this out. Because the whole thing with feminism is it's always been built on getting the same, being like men too.
Mhm.
We can't be like men,
Right.
you know? And so what's resulted is this great imbalance because if we want to still be on this planet and reproduce, women still have
Mhm.
babies and people have families. But and the whole traditional thing had been if the woman has a baby, she has to stay at home. And I was just thinking about this, and traditionally with the men were working and that's why they got paid the money. And they didn't stop thinking about, well, because and they were getting in the initial rationalization was that they were paying for the family, so they needed to get paid more than the women. But that has changed, but there's still that income gap.
Right.
So all of these things, people have accepted and been doing things the same old way for such a long time, but things have changed dramatically.
Mhm.
And if we're not willing to look at each other's stories, to start to get to know people as people and start making some changes, things are just going to get, to me, less and less human. And when we get less and less human, people return to weapons and all kinds of insanity. And people who have the biggest gun or the biggest mouth or the biggest ego lead people who have denied themselves their own power, who have denied their own stories, who don't even, who diminish their stories because they might not see them on TV or, you know, people have disparaged them. But and the thing, and the only thing to me that people should be judging people and looking at is, are you hurting people or are you helping
Right.
people? You know, and just because and the whole some of these things that people say about different groups of people are based on nothing except somebody's weird
Mhm.
story. But if we look at and remember, it's just a story. Let me get to know that person. Let me get to go over to that neighborhood where they say it's so bad. And it isn't, it's just some people we don't know.
Mhm.
And so these are and that's why I feel like getting people to start to tell their stories to each other and quit being politicians in one way or another, or salesmen, or even being the
Mhm.
boss, you
Right.
know.
Yeah.
And so a lot of it, because my whole concept of power is a much more spiritual base, but it's also the things that you look at with people who have achieved power use, generosity, gratitude, presence, mindfulness, and it creates abundance. And abundance isn't always a lot of money.
Mhm. Right.
It's just being stable and solid on this earth and knowing that you're protected and everything's going to be okay.
Right. Exactly. Exactly. Um. So in environments, um, where people kind of, and I think we kind of touched up on this a little bit. It comes probably from ancestral thinking. But, when people think that they don't have power, you could let's take a minority, and I'm gonna correct that because I've
Thank
read
you.
I've read,
Thank you.
your blog and everything, which pretty much it makes sense. Stop calling yourself a minority, because to me, and I agree with you, when we start saying that we're a minority, then we're kinda diminishing our role as who we are as a human. So I definitely agree with you on that point. But let's say that you have this one black woman that's working in a workplace environment, and she believes that she's not being treated fairly, and because of you know I tend to think that when black people said that when they are being discriminated against, they know what it feels like. I mean, you take that's some credibility towards to that. But this person feels that they don't have a voice. I mean, even with human resources or anything like that, they feel that they can't go to that human resource person because they don't have in power as being the only black person up in the workplace environment. What advice would you give to that individual so that that individual can tap into the power in which, she or he may have.
Well, it takes it's a process of getting into your power, or you're just going to be or it's just courage. Bottom line is, you and and I don't mean to be cliche, but really in almost every situation there is a
Mhm,
choice. You're gonna, if somebody's got a gun at your head and they say, if you move, I'm gonna shoot you. You can move or not. If you are working in a job and the people treat you like crap, and you've been looking for work and you still can't get a job, it's your choice of what am I going to do? Am I going to still get treated like crap, or am I going to tell my mom or my friend or my husband or my boyfriend or my somebody that I can't take this anymore? I might need your help. I've been looking for a job forever, and these people are still treating me like crap, and so I don't know how long I can take this. So it's a matter, and actually I just read this article yesterday in Inc.
mhm,
magazine, and this title was this one thing Steve Jobs did that makes the difference between a person who succeeds and one who doesn't. And what it was to ask for help.
mhm. Yes.
And it's and the other thing is to ask for help, and in our minds to look at how we're thinking at the situation,
Mhm,
about mindset. And see, and that whole thing, like beginning with that word, might just take example, the word minority. We keep using that, and it just like makes me so upset. We use it for business, minority
mhm.
business. What's a minority business?
Right,
Who's the
right.
minority? What minority? And the whole thing about this, and the irony of all of this is that within 20 to 30 years, at the most maybe 50 years, white men will be the
Mhm,
minority. and definitely wealthy
Right.
white men will be a numerical minority. And yet we will get caught up in listening to old wealthy white men try to tell
Right.
us, and people are actually using words of minority majority or majority minority, which is an oxymoron. It's stupid. It's either a numerical majority or it's not. But of course, we can understand that since we've had two presidential elections that were not a numerical majority. So, so we are actually living in that book that was written 1984, but it's followed us into the 21st century where people use language
Hmm.
to create confusion,
Right.
really. But when you're telling a story, you can't use all those confusing words and stuff. You're going to have to get into saying, hey, well, it's like more Spanish speaking people in California now, and they're pushing the numbers in Arizona and
Hmm.
Texas. And that ain't going to
Right.
change because it's been known for over 20 years. Because I learned this when I was in college in Denver that Latinos, Spanish speaking people, and um, Middle Eastern people are increasing. They are having
Hmm.
babies. Black people, once they start making money, don't start having that many babies. And then, and actually, the indigenous Native American people are continuing to grow in population. And of course, most white women are having fewer or less babies too, and there's just less population. So this this country is already a multicultural country.
Hmm.
It's just that we are still in this a political and economic apartheid state, which no one wants to talk about. But if you look at the money, the stories around money, the realities, the real stories around corporations, which are more international as well as, just national. All of those things that are big, big, big out there. But when you get into the little things, the people who work in those corporations, the people who are working, a lot of people who are working now remote or hybrid, they're working at home, they're part of a team, but they don't feel part of the
Hmm.
team. So they employed coach. But if the coach is only talking to that one member of the team,
Right.
the team's still not going to get together.
Exactly.
And so that's why I created the Power Store experience. My real goal is to really try and make workplaces better
Hmm.
to help employees because actually my work history was my experience in most jobs. I had one of those very short career, short jobs that a lot of young people are doing now because I couldn't find things that were meaningful or businesses would change and a lot of things. It's interesting to me to see how younger people are spending less time in jobs trying to find something that's meaningful. And if businesses lose money, you know, letting employees go than having to get rid of them. Whereas if they can create a
Hmm.
climate that makes people feel valued, that as well as pays them
Yeah.
well, but also gives them some fulfillment that doesn't really necessarily have to cost a lot of money once they create the environment.
Yeah. Well, I definitely think that you have given us some solutions to to that issue, and I hope that if you own a business out there and you have employees working in your business, that you're listening and taking heed to this conversation, and definitely feel the urge to definitely reach out to GoGo so that sit down and have a consultation, a talk with her about improving the workplace environment because I think that, the framework in which she's providing, giving this is tools to start to restructuring and making better workplace environments. Um, Gogo, I do want to ask you, back with storytelling and philanthropic endeavors, what kind of tools can come from storytelling as someone, who wants to be. And I when I say philanthropy, and I had a young lady on here last week, and I explained to her that philanthropy to me, it doesn't necessarily mean a financial contribution. It's being philanthropic. It means also donating your time, volunteering your service. So that's what philanthropy means to me too as well. So what kind of how can storytelling experience mm, shape those type of endeavors in philanthropy?
I think that when people, elder women now, women over 50 now, and I'm talking specifically not only black women and white women. When you look at what's on Facebook, they're very much into celebrating their attractiveness, the fact that they're healthy and that they're working maybe. But it's not many are talking about what they're giving back to the
Hmm.
community or what they're doing particularly for their family. And I'm not saying they're
Right.
not doing it, but they're not sharing it. And that's what needs to be shared. People need to know that as we live long lives, many of us are choosing not to just spend all of our time just watching TV, eating, sleeping, and maybe seeing our younger relatives or siblings. That people, as long as we're healthy
Mhm.
and in our right mind, we have wisdom and experience to contribute, that younger folks and businesses should be open to receiving when it's offered to them, rather than putting people at the bottom of the pile when they're applying for a job because of their age.
Right. Mm.
And so in terms of philanthropy, there those women who are in a position of leadership in a business or community can start helping their other sisters who are wanting to get into
Mhm.
positions, which does happen a lot in some places. And that's what I and actually sharing and basically just sharing their
Yeah.
stories, which is their experiences, and the more you share what you've known or what you've seen, then it creates that energy where more people will come to you and more people will start to recognize, hey, we've got these resources, we've got these women with talent and knowledge, and let's use them. They might not speak quite the same tech
Right.
lingo,
Yeah.
but we could learn from them. And I'm saying this because I had been applying for jobs that I was more than qualified for, but they were young people,
Mm-hmm.
and it was like, oh, we don't want to talk to her.
Right. Yeah, ageism is
It's
it's
another language.
very real out here. And I was having a conversation with a friend of mine about this not too long or so ago. Is that very very well qualified individuals, very well qualified, and I'm not only with educational, but I'm just talking about, the practical experience in which they carry with them. Experience means a whole lot. Yeah, I mean, I myself, I've got two law degrees, one thing another. That's great. That's fantastic. I love it. I would never, wish that, I didn't go that route. I'm very proud of that. But I don't go around bragging, either about all these initials and letters that I got behind my name. And, I know my cousin told me, you earned it, you need to carry it. And I'm beginning to, get my feel up into that and claiming it. But, it's the practical experience means a whole lot. And I think that these workplaces definitely need to, take heed of that, because these questions that I know with me in the legal field anyway, questions would come up. And only an experienced person who has been in the field and understood, the family dynamics of certain situations which was going on, to be able to help these individuals out. So, but I see a lot of, younger folks, and I'm not taking anything away from you younger guys. I think that you guys are smart, technical savvy and everything, and you're gonna, make great, future doctors, attorneys, and whatever. But all at the same time, let's not forget about, the people that have been here and are well seasoned and very, very capable and can do their jobs, hands down. So, um, yeah, ageism is definitely real, and that's a whole nother podcast on that subject, which I may
Yeah.
have to bring you back and forth. I do want to talk about with ancestors. What can Black women? What can we do? And I think you kind of mentioned it a while ago. Is like that village. That we make sure that we're taking care of one another. Lending our resources, lending whatever skills or whatever. But what other advice would you have for Black women of how about using our ancestral, whether it be healing, our ancestral traditions, roots, or whatever? What else can we do to improve our communities?
Well, first of all, I encourage people to not dismiss their ancestors because they're Christians.
Hmm.
Uh, it's not ancestral worship. It never was worship. It was just honoring, respecting our ancestors and your family members. And the fact is that we the main thing technology has done is taken us further and further away from our natural spiritual tendencies
Yeah.
that we had we have, even just like animals have, in terms of being in relation to nature and what's going on. But we're and I was thinking about this, we are the only animals that gotta wear clothes.
Well,
because we
uh,
because we can't handle the elements the way the other other creatures do. So we everything that it's funny, everything that humans history, it's always, oh, we're making progress, instead of saying, oh, this is great just the way it is, let's leave it alone.
mhm,
And just, which was traditional cultures, but in the West, and even that's part of business, it's got to be new, we got to have something else. But
gotta be on
if
top. That, yeah.
if if we start developing more businesses that help people and that celebrate people and that are less creating more psychological problems and names, but really looking at what we have that's good and what we can work with, we we turn to our ancestors to get in touch with that. We turn to those who were here before us. That's
Mhm.
all. That's all it is. It's like trying to connect in a conscious, energetic way with the wisdom of people who were here before, know what it was like
Mhm.
before. And also, from a spiritual basis, of what I've been taught is that ancestors are not the people who just died last year,
Right.
necessarily 5 years ago. And consciousness continues. And so our ancestors are those who've consciously, energetically, spiritually, however you believe, have evolved to a point where they can actually benefit us just by calling on them, just connecting with them. And the other thing why connecting with our ancestors is important is it should make us feel less alone. Because so many people they're saying are really still suffering from loneliness and a sense of aloneness. But if you can connect and know that you are connected to millions of people
Right.
because you're alive and millions of people came before you, and all of this ties to power and story, because you can connect to your ancestors. That gives you many stories. It also can increase your power because you're part of a long lineage. And it's, whatever, even if your most recent uh, family line, if you come from a family line in which your grandfather was in jail and your father was in jail and now you're in jail, so what? If you
Right.
want to not be in jail, you can start telling another story. So when you
Right.
get out of jail, you can lead a life that will not get you back in jail. And
Right.
then you can also, even while you're in jail, start saying, what can I do? People who before my grandfather who weren't in jail,
Mhm.
You
Yeah.
know, and so that's where it all comes together. It's really going into ourselves, but going into ourselves saying we're not alone. We have inherited
Mhm.
genetically and energetically and spiritually. And this is scientific. It's science, folks.
Mhm.
It's not uh, superstition. DNA is inherited, and it's
Mhm.
little small differences that make each person different.
Mhm.
And so, and when you think about all these lineages, and if you ever want to sit down, just start thinking about, just do the math of, start thinking about grandparents and going back and back. There's millions of them. Each of us as an individual has so much energy we can pull from. And
Definitely. Yeah. Well, Gogo, it has been a pleasure to speak with you. I wish that, well, I would definitely want I definitely want you back. I definitely I mean, just the topic, in and of itself, we could probably do a few segments up on the storytelling and ancestral healing and getting in touch and because these are tools in which I want my grandchildren to know. And as far as storytelling goes, whether it be, with journals, I find myself well, I like to journal. And I even thought about, even recording myself because there's times when I'm like, dang, why come I didn't have that tape recorder going when I was talking to grandma? Or, my influencers, or one of
right,
the sisters, or, why come I didn't have that? Because these are important. These are, there's traditional stuff which comes from up out of this. And these are, you know, values and beliefs and lessons and all that stuff that are my grandson, 10 years from now, my oldest grandson, he's gonna wanna know these things, and it's important for us to explain get with family, get with family, sit down, and talk and have these conversations, I know that I've started, family trees on both sides of my families, and I'm pretty sure many others have too, but, get connected, whether if it's Facebook pages or just whatever, sit there and have them stories and share it. Get your historian of the family. I know on my mom's side of the family, we pretty much have like a historian of the family, and he records and he, with the artifacts and just all that stuff, so that these things don't get lost, and we be doomed to repeat some things and or believe that we don't have power, you know, um, that faulty type of thinking. So, go. So what's next? Let's tell the people about what projects that you have going on now, and if someone wanted to connect with you, how can they connect with you?
okay, well, to connect with me, is best to email at gogogriot.us. People can also visit my website. If there's a link there, and you could sign up for a 15-minute intro chat. I'm actually right now, like I said, just starting to market to businesses, and actually working a little bit locally in terms of trying to get some speaking engagements and speak to the Chamber of Commerce, and um, start letting people know what I do, where I am. Because the town I live in is a tourist town, and they have a lot of places that have retreats and things. And so I wanted to let people know I'm here and see if I can do some collaborations with people to say, if you let people know I'm here and I can offer to do a workshop with them or something, and you can get a piece of it. So that's one thing, that's things. But basically, I'm kind of just continuing on with marketing and sharing this. And like I said, I'm thinking about doing, eventually, I may do something online, um, if I don't start getting some. Actually, I will probably do something online for people
Okay,
to get an experience. And I know I'll be doing something with feminine frequency.
okay,
And people can also, if they want to, go to YouTube. My channel is Vibrant Velvet Voice. Or I think also there's something YouTube at GoGo Griot too.
okay,
'Cause- But actually, I'm also on Facebook, GoGo Griot. And that's a good way to follow me because I post 3 times a week at least, and anything I do is gonna be on Facebook and LinkedIn.
All right. So if you guys, you make sure, I'm not gonna say if, but you guys make sure that you go out there, you like, follow, and share her page, GoGo Griot. Also, Vibrant. What was it? Vibrant.
Vibrant Velvet Voice. That's
Vibrant Velvet Voice on YouTube. And is that on Instagram too as well?
it's GoGo Griot. Vibrant Velvet Voice is actually the name of my company, and it's my when you sign up with Google, you have a Google account, and so that's another,
So that's how the name came
that's
about.
a
Okay.
yeah, so that's the business name,
Okay.
and
All
that
right.
ended up being one of my YouTube channels that I've just left at that name.
So, yeah, again, it has been a pleasure. I have appreciated this conversation. Thank you so much for being here and letting us know more about storytelling. And hopefully, we get some folks that gonna go follow and share. And again, in the future, I like to sit down and talk with you and um, carry this conversation on, especially with the ancestral healing portion of it, which we didn't touch a whole lot tonight about. And I want to expand upon that. So I think that I'm trying to plan something for October. So I'll get with you and see, what your schedule's like, and hopefully that you can be, a part of this special little celebration thing I got,
Oh,
and about freeing ourselves. So without further ado, we'll be back here next week, next Tuesday night, at 7 o'clock Central Standard Time, and we'll continue our theme with Black Business Month, and we'll have a special gentleman that I'm waiting to confirm. So hopefully we'll have him here, and we'll continue that theme. And go. I will see you, and I will talk with you later, and I will definitely be in touch. And thank you again for being.
you're welcome.
All
Thank
right,
you. It's been a pleasure. Bye
all right.
bye.
Bye.
Bye bye.
Bye. Bye.